When Lieutenant Emily Carter first climbed into the pilot's seat, half the flight crew couldn't hide their smirks. Some of them even made quiet bets that she'd choke on her first real mission. But hours later, when the rescue teams radioed back in a trembling voice who was already on the ground pulling men from burning wreckage, the entire base went silent. They realized the only person who could have beaten them there was the rookie they'd laughed at. And after that day, no one ever questioned her seat in the cockpit again. Before we dive into Emily's incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is one of those stories that'll show you exactly what happens when someone refuses to back down. Emily Carter. She's 29 years old, and honestly, she's got this understated presence about her. She's not the type to walk into a room and demand attention, but there's something about her that makes you take notice. Emily had just gotten certified on the HH-60 Pavehawk. That's the Air Force's premier combat rescue helicopter. These things are absolute beasts, designed to fly into the worst situations imaginable and pull people out alive. She'd only transferred to this base a few weeks earlier, still learning all the local protocols and procedures. Her commanding officer had vouched for her skills. Apparently, her training records were impressive. But here's the thing about military bases. They're like high schools with really expensive toys. The veteran crew chiefs and the pararescue teams, the PJs as they call them, they mostly saw a pretty face and figured she'd crumble the second things got real. She actually heard them talking about it more than once. Little comments like, "She's cute, but probably soft when it counts." You know, that casual sexism that they probably didn't even think was a big deal. But Emily, she wasn't there to prove them wrong with words. She was going to let her flying do the talking. Life at this particular base was pretty routine. They were running patrols over some seriously rugged terrain in Eastern Europe, right near some tense international borders. The kind of place where tensions can flare up without warning. Most days were mind-numbingly boring. Endless stretches of sky, radio checks, and not much else. Emily spent her time quietly flying training runs, triple-checking every single emergency drill she could think of. She was incredibly methodical about it, painfully aware that every move she made was being watched and judged. She didn't want respect handed to her on a silver platter. She wanted to earn every ounce of it. Then one day, everything changed in an instant. The emergency klaxon started blaring across the base, and everyone knew that sound meant one thing. Somebody was in serious trouble. An army convoy had been ambushed on a remote mountain pass. An IED, that's an improvised explosive device, had torn through the lead truck like it was made of paper. Small arms fire was pinning down the survivors, and they were trapped with nowhere to go. But here's where it gets complicated. The weather was closing in fast. This brutal sleet storm that was grounding most of the aircraft on base. When you're flying a helicopter, weather isn't just inconvenient, it's potentially deadly. The HH-60 Pavehawk, though, it was still rated to push through conditions like this. Barely, but technically possible. Emily's crew chief looked at her, then up at the gray, angry sky, and you could see the doubt in his eyes. We're really going to do this? Here's the thing. Technically, this mission was optional. The quick reaction force could reach the convoy by land, but it would take them hours. The weather was legitimately dangerous for flying. Most pilots would have looked at those conditions and said, "Sorry, too risky. We'll wait for backup." But Emily's hands were already moving across the controls. "Strap in, we're wheels up in 3 minutes." Nobody argued with her. They might have had their doubts about the rookie, but not enough to volunteer to take her place on what could be a suicide mission. As they cut through freezing rain and swirling clouds that seemed determined to knock them out of the sky, Emily felt every nerve in her body firing like live electrical wires. This wasn't a training exercise. This was the real deal. Her co-pilot kept reading off terrain warnings, his voice getting higher and more stressed with each update. Mountains were appearing and disappearing in the mist like ghosts, and they were flying blind through some of the most unforgiving terrain in Europe. Emily had to throttle back just enough to dodge a mountain peak that materialized out of the fog like something from a nightmare, only to push right back into what they call the kill zone on the other side. Down below them, muzzle flashes were lighting up the darkness like angry fireflies. Someone was shooting, and Emily's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. But she didn't flinch, not even for a second. When Emily's helicopter touched down, they were landing directly under enemy fire. I'm talking about bullets pinging off the fuselage, that distinctive metallic sound that means someone's trying to kill you. The pararescue jumpers, the PJs, jumped out of the bird and immediately started sprinting toward the burning wreckage. These guys are absolute legends, trained to run toward danger when everyone else is running away. Through her headset, Emily heard a panicked voice, one of the medics on the ground. "Whoever's flying that bird, tell them we've got more casualties up the ridge. They'll never make it by foot in time." Most pilots would have waited, called for backup, followed protocol. Emily didn't wait. She pulled collective, that's helicopter speak for going up fast, and skimmed over the ridge by less than 20 feet. We're talking about threading the needle between mountain peaks and zero visibility conditions. She set down again in this tiny clearing so violently that the landing skids actually dug grooves into the mud. Her crew was yelling at her through the comms, but Emily wasn't budging. There were people who needed help, and she was going to get them. What happened next was like something out of a war movie, except this was real life, with real consequences. One by one, wounded soldiers were being dragged aboard Emily's helicopter. Blood was pooling under their boots on the aircraft floor. These weren't training dummies, these were real people, some of them barely conscious, all of them depending on Emily to get them out alive. Her hands stayed rock steady on the controls. Outside, the rotor wash was spraying sleet and dirt over broken bodies, creating this chaotic storm of debris and noise. Then the radio call came in that made every single person back at the base stop what they were doing. "We're secure. First casualty evacuation complete, thanks to Lieutenant Carter's aircraft. No sign of the quick reaction force yet. Looks like we got here first." The rookie had beaten the ground forces to the rescue. When they finally made it back to the field hospital, Emily was soaked to the bone, physically and emotionally exhausted, running on pure adrenaline and willpower. She climbed down from her bird, probably shaking from the combination of stress and relief. The same crew chief who had been making jokes about her cute flight suit just days earlier walked up to her. His eyes were wide, and for a moment he just stood there, completely speechless. Then he reached out, clapped her on the shoulder, and said something simple but powerful. "Hell of a job, ma'am." Coming from this grizzled veteran who'd probably seen everything, those 5 words meant more than any medal. As the sun finally managed to break through the storm clouds, Emily found herself sitting on an ammunition crate outside the medical tent. Her helmet was in her lap, and she was watching the medics work on the soldiers she'd just pulled out of that hell. These men were alive because she didn't hesitate, because when everyone else was calculating risks and following protocols, she made the call that mattered. And all around her, she could see that something fundamental had changed. The smirks were gone. The whispered comments had stopped. Instead, there were respectful nods, the kind of careful distance that warriors give to one of their own. She'd earned her place, and everyone knew it. A few days later, Emily got called into her commanding officer's office. She was honestly expecting to get chewed out for that crazy ridge landing in zero visibility. Military brass don't usually love it when you improvise during life or death situations. Instead, her CO just slid something across the desk, a challenge coin with the unit crest on it. The weight of it in her palm felt significant, like it represented something much bigger than just a piece of metal. "That was a gutsy call, Lieutenant," he said. "Those men are breathing today because you didn't wait for the weather to clear. You saw what needed to be done, and you did it." That night, alone in her bunk, Emily kept turning that challenge coin over and over in her hands. It caught the light from the small lamp beside her bed, reflecting all the emotions of the past few days. She thought about the smirks, the whispered comments, the assumptions people had made about her. But mostly, she thought about those soldiers clutching tourniquets as her rotor blades chopped overhead, trusting her to get them home. And she smiled, not because they finally respected her, but because she'd proven something much more important to herself. She knew, without any doubt, that she belonged in that cockpit. Picture Emily standing beside her HH-60 under a canopy of stars, one hand resting on the cool metal skin of the aircraft that had become an extension of herself. Somewhere in the reflection on the aircraft's surface, she could see herself looking back, steady, unflinching, finally certain of exactly who she was and what she was capable of. Stories like Emily's remind us that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and doing what's right anyway. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear about real strength. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of everyday heroes. I'll see you in the next one.